You gonna manage that escrow?
Yeah, that's what
I know. Okay.
Hello, YouTubers. We're going to start in just a minute. And I'm just going to get the room ready here. We're going to start, and then we'll talk about escrow management with the people.
Steven,
Yes.
when I do my
Oh,
BRBC,
wait.
yes,
Something's going wrong with my presentation. There we go. All right. All right. Hold on, YouTubers. I'll be right back. I'm just
when we do my BRBC today,
Yeah.
do I want to include the financial, personal financial stuff? You know, how the client needs to show us their financials.
They don't have to show you their.
Okay.
They just have to sign saying they don't have them on your. Okay. Right. Check the box. All right. Who's staying for the class? Ricardo, are you staying? Yeah. All right. Norman, do you want to come to this class? Because I need to close this because we tend to be louder. Can you close it and help Norman in? And anybody else who wants to attend the class? All right. All right, we're going to talk about being an escrow and what that looks like. And we're going to get going because we have a lot to cover. I'm just waiting for a couple people in the room to get settled. One second. Okay. So this is, we're going to spend the next time together talking about escrow. So the idea here is you finally have a client that writes an offer that gets accepted and you're in escrow now. So what happens? So the first thing we're going to do is what the heck is escrow? What do we mean? That's enough, Ricardo. It doesn't need to be that's just three. That's fine. What is the escrow? What is the process of escrow? What's it all about? What is your role as an agent? What are the typical activities in a transaction? We're going to do a case study and look at a specific activities and what you should be doing, and it might raise some questions. We'll talk about that. And then we'll have time for questions at the end. So what is escrow? So escrow is a legal arrangement that involves a neutral third party that holds the funds and the documents until specific conditions are met associated with the contract. There's a company that manages this process, this legal arrangement. They're called an escrow company, right? Another way to think about this is that an escrow is a non-physical container. Imagine in your head a container, and it holds activities. It doesn't actually hold physical things. The activity of moving money from pot A to pot B, the activity of moving paperwork from A to B, and the activity of managing things, managing activities. And so that's what escrow is. Yes. Escrow companies. Yeah, now, that's a good question. In Northern California, which is a bit of an aberration, different than Southern California, different than other states, title and escrow are the same company. So when we say Chicago Title Company is managing the escrow, they have a whole escrow department side to them. But if you were in Southern California, Chicago Title would be the title company, and you'd have Smith Escrow on managing this container, so to speak. It's a good question. All right. Escrow begins when a purchase agreement is ratified, and it ends when either the transfer of title is recorded at the county or the transaction is canceled. So my question is, let me just go back a second. The transfer of title is recorded at the county. That means the sale's done or canceled, as happens sometimes. Okay. All right. So when is ratification? I just said escrow opens when the RPA is when the contract is ratified. What do we mean by that? Dustin?
When both sides of the party have signed the contract.
No. Shandor?
It's when the seller signed the contract, return it to the buyer's agent.
You're closer. When the last person, the last side that signs, sends it back. That's when you have ratification. So you represent the buyer. In our example, we're going to be doing a buyer escrow. You represent the buyer. Your buyer writes an offer and sends it in. You send it in for your buyer. The seller signs it with their agent. We're not ratified yet. Seller sends it back. Whether or not you acknowledge receiving it, it is considered ratified at that point. Usually email, of course in person, but email doesn't mean you open the email, Mr. Buyer's agent. Now, a good listing agent will phone and make sure you got it, right? And you as a good buyer's agent will be scanning your emails to make sure it came in. But no, Shandor's right. However, it could work a different way. What if that same buyer's agent wrote an offer for their buyer and the seller countered it and said, we like it, but we want 5,000 more. And the buyer's agent has their buyer agree to the counter offer. Yes, we agree to pay 5,000 more. Then you're not ratified yet. Then you have to send it back to the seller's agent. And the activity of sending it back to the seller's agent is the ratification. Whether or not the listing agent admits to having received it yet. Okay. I mean, obviously they want to. And this is, again, as you, the initiating agent, should always follow up, make sure that things are received. Now, you may think it's just a lot of paperwork, but it could be critically important if in a multiple offer situation to know that the other side got your paperwork in a timely manner, because you might lose out if they don't, right? So it becomes very time sensitive in multiple offer scenarios. All right, everyone clear about ratification? All right. Let's talk more about that. Oh, we did that already. Okay. What is the role of the agent? What is your role? You are the project manager. You get to manage this thing, right? You are going to keep your client on track regarding all their contractual obligations. And there are a lot of them, right? Your client has signed a contract that requires specific performance. We had talked before about specific performance. Your client has to do certain things. We're going to talk about some of those things in a minute. You want to make sure the client knows they have to do those things and that they do them. You are going to coordinate with other participants in the deal, because it's not just you and your buyer. It's you and your buyer in escrow. It's you and your buyer and your buyer's lender. It's you and your buyer and the home inspector or pest inspector or appraiser. It's you and your buyer and the agent on the other side. So you coordinate with all these people to make sure everyone's on the same page. And what is your goal here? To get the deal across the finish line, to get it sold. Now, the little caveat to that is you always must act as a fiduciary for your client. We'll talk more about that. Another thing you do, you verify the accuracy and completion of all the documents. And this is true whether you employ a transaction coordinator or not. Our office has a very good deal on transaction coordinator. These are third-party admin people who make sure the I's are dotted and T's are crossed on your paperwork, basically. We have one in-house, TC Advisors, and they will, for a very good rate compared to private people, do your document transaction management. However, they are not responsible for incorrect forms. That's the first thing. So you should be verifying what they are doing. And then the other thing about your TC is they will not send out on your behalf any forms that are sensitive to the contractual terms. So for example, if you say to your transaction coordinator, please have my buyer sign all these disclosures, that's fine. But if you say to your transaction coordinator, I just filled out a contingency release, can you send it to my buyer? No, you can't do that. The transaction coordinator will not do things that push the contract performance items. So they will not fill out and send to your buyer or seller a contingency release form. They will not fill out and complete any addenda, any amendments to the contract after it's ratified. They will not do any. They will not do the AVID. They will not send the AVID for you, and they will typically not do your VP, verification of property condition, for you, because those are all very tightly related to the contract. Those are just some examples, but they will help you a lot. They're really well worth working with, to especially around making sure that everything is signed and initialed. But you should be verifying everything. And remember, it's your name on the contract, not the transaction coordinators. So it's ultimately your responsibility. So this is a list of a typical escrow where nothing goes wrong. This is just the standard things we're going to do. We're going to go through each one of these, but this is a list of them. All right, so we're going to do a case study. We're going to imagine a $1 million condo sale where you represent the buyer. It's a 30-day deal. We have a 10-day investigation contingency, a 14-day appraisal contingency, and a 17-day loan contingency. This is all negotiated. We're in contract, right? The disclosure package we got from the seller prior to getting this offer accepted included the TDS, SPQ, and the listing agent's AVID. That's all that was there. Everyone with me? All right. Let's open escrow first. That is the very first thing you need to do. The very, very first thing. You're going to contact the escrow officer. You're going to send the RPA fully signed to them. You're going to send them the contact information for your buyer, your buyer's lender, and any transaction coordinator you're working with. You're also going to make sure that your buyer gets the fully signed offer paperwork. They may not have the latest fully signed counteroffer or fully signed addendum. So you want to make sure they have a full package back to your buyer, that they have their own copy. And by the way, you're going to work with folks who are not necessarily comfortable with digital signatures. You may have to be scanning and sending PDFs to them. It depends on the situation. And of course, you want your client to have your transaction coordinator's information too. So you're going to send your buyer the transaction coordinator's info. When you are sending the RPA to escrow, do not send them anything but the RPA that is personal and private to your buyer and the seller. For example, escrow does not need to see the proof of funds and all the bank statement stuff. Escrow does not need to see the pre-approval letter. Escrow does not need to see all the advisories and addenda. I mean, advisories, not. They just need to see stuff that's in the contract. That's the first thing you got to do. The very next thing you need to do is arrange for the initial deposit. Avoid using the word earnest money. We talk about this as the initial deposit now. My recommendation is you arrange for this as soon as possible after ratification. Now, that doesn't mean the money goes in as soon as possible. It means you arrange for it. So what you need to tell your buyer, maybe in your second email to them. So your first email is, congratulations, you're in escrow, and you send them the contact information and you send them their copy. Then the next email is, here's your instructions for getting your escrow, your deposit over to escrow. And you're going to tell them how much they're going to owe escrow, how much they need to send in for the deposit. Because remember, the deposit goes to the escrow company. It doesn't go directly to the seller or to the seller's agent, right? You're going to tell them when they need to get it in by, and you're going to tell them who they have to contact at the escrow company to make arrangements. And you may discuss with them their options for delivery. The contract actually has a line, how is escrow going to get this money? Is it going to be a wire transfer, money order, personal check, or some other delivery method? You're going to discuss that with your buyer as well. Remind them. Now, does the contract specify any timeline for the deposit to go to escrow? Does the contract have any information about that? How long is the deposit? How quickly does the deposit need to go to escrow? It absolutely does. In the line item for initial deposit on the contract, it says how many days the buyer has to get the money over to escrow. Does anyone know what the contract default is? 3 days. That's right. The contract default is 3 days. However, you are going to have situations where either for competitive reasons, you might have 1 day or 2 day specified. Whatever it is, you need to tell your buyer as soon as possible. You may have already had these discussions, but you want to make sure, right, when you get into contract, they're reminded of their deadline. Yes.
Is the initial deposit like 3%?
The standard in the contract, the standard at custom is 3%. If you write less than 3%, many sellers agents will counter the offer back because they want to know the buyer has skin in the game. They want to know the buyer is a serious buyer. And if you do 0, 1, or 2%, it makes the offer weaker substantially.
Is the not refundable though? Like if the buyer backs out pretty later?
It is absolutely refundable, subject to the terms of the contract. Now, this is not a class on how the buyer fee, the deposit is refundable. I encourage you to watch my class on working with buyer contingencies. It's on my coaching page and soon the portal as well. And you can watch that class and you can learn about how the buyer gets their money back. Okay.
Where's your coaching page?
My coaching page, text me. Okay. It's on YouTube. There's all kinds of great classes on it. And anyway, all right. So that's the initial deposit. This is a very, very important step. Has anyone been to my coaching page in this room? No? You all should subscribe. It's great. And you can get alerts on YouTube saying I just dropped a new class if you're not here or something. Anyway, all right. You want to send transaction terms to escrow. Now, the good escrow officers will send you an email saying, tell us your terms, right? But whether they do or not, within 3 days of getting into contract, you should be sending terms over. What are terms? Sale price, deposit amount, contingency timeframes. Is there a home warranty? Is there a rent back? You know, who's paying for sewer lateral in Oakland? There's just a whole list of, they give you a little list, you fill it in. If you have a good transaction coordinator, they will help with this, but you must verify what your TC puts down there. Okay. Your job here is to make sure that whatever the terms are that are being communicated to escrow, that they're correct as you understand them to the contract. Make sense? Why does escrow need terms? So that they can reconcile the file at the end properly, make sure the money goes where it has to go, and know what they're doing. Very, very important. Yes.
Terms are in the RPA.
They are, but they're all over the place in the RPA. This is like a term sheet where escrow knows what to do in a summary form. You are going to review disclosures. Now, remember, we're in a buyer agent situation, right? So we have two main deadlines for this as I see it. First of all, you want to review the disclosures within 1 to 3 days of document receipt. Now, 1 to 3 days of document receipt could be before you write the offer, right? You may have looked over the disclosures as prep. Our area is very well known for sellers providing a disclosure package, but that is outside of the East Bay here, outside of the San Francisco Bay Area, even going into Contra Costa County. A lot of agents don't provide disclosures. If you do a foreclosure sale, if you have some sort of distress sale, you might not get disclosures. So it's not standard across the industry by any means. So whether you get your disclosures before you go into contract or whether you get them after you get them, you want to review them. As the agent, you want to review these disclosures. The first and most important thing you're going to be doing is verifying that you have a complete package. Do we have a complete package? So the question is, what's missing in our case study? Here's our case study. The disclosure package includes the TDS SPQ and the listing agent AVID. In this case study, what are we missing? Anyone know?
CCR.
HOA docs. So CC&Rs are one part of the HOA docs. There's lots of HOA docs, but that is one of them, and it's clearly missing. We don't have any HOA docs. So that's a very good one. What else are we missing? Shonda, you've closed a couple deals. What else? Oh my goodness. You'll learn over time. You'll get memorized. What about lead-based pay? If it was built before 78. Yes, The lead-based paint disclosure is not here. That's not the first one that would have come to my mind, but that's a good one. The natural hazard disclosure report is missing. Yes, seller's obligated to give that in almost every contract. Also, what's missing here is the preliminary title report. The prelim, very important. Could mean that the seller can't sell the house to your buyer. Could be problems. Could be all kinds of unresolved liens. Who knows what's going on? Could be easements and encroachments that your buyer's going to not be happy about. Who knows? Right? So this is why verification is so important. Okay. If you find that there's stuff missing, you, the buyer's agent, need to arrange for the seller to provide it through the seller's agent. Mr. Seller's agent, when am I getting the prelim? When am I getting the natural hazard disclosure report? When am I getting all those HOA docs? Well, we just ordered them. A good listing agent will pre-order all these things, right? The contract handles this, by the way. There's a whole section in the contract of what happens, what is the delivery deadline for certain things, including seller documents. Does this make sense? Yes. They might ask them. They can do a little bit of that. They just can't. Even if they say we're telling you you're missing Form A, it's on you to make sure that you have the forms, that you know if something's missing. Yes.
Denny ordered.
She ordered it for you. And Denny is the in-house TC here, and Chandra had a listing, and the TC ordered one of the reports for him. And by the way, if you get into contract without a prelim, the escrow company will automatically reach out and get that for you. So you don't actually have to order the prelim if you get into contract without one. It'll get ordered. Norman.
So it's not always on the seller to provide the prelim?
It is not required prior to getting into contract. The seller is obligated to provide everything the contract says they're supposed to provide, including a prelim, within the time specified in the contract. We are spoiled here because we get so much of it beforehand. But you're a buyer's agent in this scenario. You need to go chase after that seller and say, send us this paperwork.
Get into contract without seeing a prelim, and then the prelim comes up and is a major issue.
Well, that's why we have contingencies. Very good point. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So when you've gotten all these disclosures, or even if you only have some of them, start preparing a list of notable information you learn from reviewing the disclosures. Now, if you're brand new and you are looking at your third one ever, talk to the mentor. Talk to your mentor. Talk to me. Is this a normal disclosure package? What is missing? Right? Turn to your support. But as you get better and better at this, you'll get faster and faster at scanning for what's missing as part of your process, and also knowing what to read to find very quickly notable things that you would want to know about as a buyer on behalf of your buyer. Things that should be kind of be of concern, that are outside of the norm. Again, as newbies, right, newer people, your mentor will help you with this. Okay. Then after you've made your list, go over all the disclosures with your client and highlight these points. So your buyer or your buyer's aware of what they're looking at with these disclosures. Because you think it's intimidating for you as new agents who've at least been studying a little bit. Imagine what a 400-page disclosure package is like for a first-time home buyer who is, not particularly detail-oriented. I mean, it could be incredibly stressful. You're going to bring that stress down. All right. So you're going to also verify insurance. You are going to make sure that your buyer, working with your buyer's lender, has their insurance in place. This is very important if there's a loan contingency, like there is in our case study, to know that the lender will do the loan. The lenders will not do the loan if the buyer doesn't have an insurance policy in place. The insurance policy doesn't take effect until closing, but you get it in place as soon as possible. This is a big deal now because insurance rates have skyrocketed and the monthly carrying cost of insurance has doubled in the last 2 years. So your buyer may not have been ready for that, right? Hopefully their lender sort of helped them get ready. Yeah, Norman.
Doesn't that give you a little bit more negotiating?
We're already in contract here. This assumes we're in contract. Now, if you're a smart buyer's agent, you're going to go start researching insurance before you even get into contract on that property to find out what your lenders are saying it's going to cost to insure. Not your lenders, your insurance people. We have an in-house insurance person, Greystone Insurance, that I mentioned for the contest in the last hour that we're launching. Greystone is one of the sponsors. That you can call them and they will happily give you an estimate of insurance. I just had it. I have a listing coming on the market and I asked Greystone for a quote and it's going to be in our disclosure package, actually, the insurance quote, because insurance is nearly tripling for this property from what my current seller is paying. So, yeah. All right. Yes. Yeah, you can refer whoever you want, as long as they're a licensed insurance agent in the state of California. I like Greystone. They're amazing. They've helped me and many of my clients lots of times. They can sometimes get insurance when somebody else is telling them they can't do it. Yeah.
So can we call Greystone and ask them, hey, can you provide a quote for
Yes.
the house, but we haven't not under contract yet, and we're thinking about right.
Yes, absolutely.
Well,
Yeah, it's an informal quote. It isn't a binding quote, but it's good enough.
that satisfying. The loan office.
No, you're not in contract yet.
Not contract.
Yeah.
So you get an estimate quote.
Yeah.
And then we have a number and we get into contract, we get an actual quote
Mhm.
with a solid number, then the loan officer is satisfied with that.
So long as the quote is agreed to by your buyer and signed,
Okay.
right? It has to be bound. They call it binding in the insurance world. So it's good enough. You might get 3 quotes afterwards. So let's suppose the first quote was a little high. So maybe you shop around, or your buyer shops around, and they end up 3 quotes, and they say, thank you for the referral to XYZ. We're going to go with AAA, right? AAA is known as a low cost leader in this area, right? Yeah, but the quality of the coverage is, you get what you pay for. It's like anything else. But anyway, my point is that your buyer may choose to go with whoever does their car insurance at the end of the day. The bottom line is you are not making that choice. You are simply connecting with your buyer. How's it going with the insurance? Connecting with the lender. Do we have the bound insurance policy yet? Before you have to remove that loan contingency. That's the job of you.
Did you encourage your buyers to shop around for insurance, or do you do some of that for them all?
No. I encourage them to shop around. The same like anything else, absolutely. Now I do give them Greystone as an option. And I'll say to my Greystone contact, Stephen Klein, I'll say, hey, I've referred my client to you, but he's also looking at this and this and this as well.
Would you get an estimate quote for them?
No.
You'd ask them to go get it.
I connect them with the service provider. Yeah.
I asked Greystone a couple of times to do the quote before we wrote an offer,
Uh-huh.
and they were like 48 hours. They responded with
Yeah.
just an email with the estimate, a rough estimate.
Yeah.
Like,
But the same.
Yeah.
good enough. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So the other thing that's going to happen in some escrows is you're going to be ordering and completing inspections. And in this case study, remember we had a 10-day investigation contingency in our case. So and remember in our package from the seller, we didn't have any inspections at all. So one of the things you're going to do is you're going to order and complete those inspections. My advice to you, order your inspections ASAP. You could even order them if you have a good enough relationship with the inspector. You can order them before you get into contract. Especially if you're the only offer and you have a high degree of confidence your offer is going to be accepted. Why would you order your inspection with your inspector before you're even in contract? No, I'm not talking about doing it before. I'm talking about ordering it before. Why would we ever want to do that? Yes, they might be busy. The best inspectors get very busy. They get very busy. So yeah, you want to order them as soon as you can. And you want to complete them as soon as possible too. Now that is subject to their availability and the site availability, but certainly before the contingency is up for investigations, because it's going to be part of your review with your buyer about investigation contingencies. We'll talk about that in a minute. You go to any and all inspections you schedule, and you want to encourage your buyer to go as well, because it's especially first-time buyers to learn about the process. You're going to make sure that everyone knows how this inspector is going to be paid. Some inspectors take Zelle or Venmo time of service. Some will take credit cards that you can phone in advance. Some will want to check, believe it or not, at time of service. Some even will take cash. I had one take cash earlier this year, which is fine. But that's between your buyer and them. All you're doing is communicating to your buyer, here are your options for payment. Okay. I like to do it because it just is this one less thing for my buyer to have to. My buyer may not be having a lot of interaction with this inspector before they show up. Some of them have contracts, some of them just show up with the contract in hand. So I like to make it very clear with my buyers how this company gets paid. The better company or individuals will take care of that themselves, but I don't rely on it. I always tell my buyers, Here's what you're going to be looking at for payment. The other thing we remind our buyers is that it's non-refundable. You were asking before about refundability of the deposit. Yes, in many cases, but inspections, non-refundable ever. Was there a question? No? Okay. The other thing you want to ask your inspectors, whether they be home, pest, chimney, mold, roof, whatever kind of inspector they are, when am I going to get my written report? When am I getting my written report? Because sometimes they'll do the inspection on Monday and it'll take them a week to get you the report, which may not be timely, right? Some of them are really good at turning the reports around quickly, especially pest companies, but the home inspectors are all over the map. Some are 2 days, some are 5 days. It's crazy. And you can push them on it, right? You can say, listen, I'm going to hire you, but I need to get this report within 2 days. Can you make that happen? And some will work with you. They want your business, especially if it looks like you know what you're talking about. They can get future business from you. It's going to be a thing, right?
In this case, you're only talking about home and pest.
I'm talking about anything.
Any,
Any and all inspections, you manage them during the escrow process that you're ordering, right? From third parties. Now, the other thing you want to do is review the report, read it over after you get it, and look for things that are a major concern or a medium concern or things that your buyer is going to be concerned about. And then you're going to arrange a time to go over it with your buyer and review it with your buyer. But you should read it before you sit down with them. You should not be seeing it for the first time because there's going to be stuff in there and you might want to call the inspector and say, what did you mean by item 7G on page 6? What was that about? Especially serious stuff. Foundation, structural, roof, you know, electrical, plumbing, heating, big things. Or if it's a pest inspection, this $4,000 charge or even more to replace the front deck. That's a very common large one we see. You may be ordering a home warranty. And I recommend you do that within a week of opening escrow, within 5 days of opening escrow. A home warranty is not insurance, right? A home warranty is like a protection plan, like you'd get a Geek Squad for your TV, right? It's a warranty to protect them against breakdown of appliances, right? So you want to look at the contract and know who's paying for it. The contract has a whole line item about this saying seller pay, buyer pay, or buyer waives to do the inspection. So if the buyer waives, not the inspection, to order the warranty. So if the buyer waives the warranty, then it doesn't matter. This isn't an issue. But if the buyer or seller is paying for it, you want to review the package options with your buyer, even if the seller is paying for it. You want to, because these warranties come with different packages. They may have the base package that's $400, and then the medium package that's like $475, and then the full service, awesome, top of the line one, which is $525, for example, right? You're going to review the package option with your client. Your client's going to pick one, right? Then escrow will get an invoice from the home warranty company. So you'll communicate with the home warranty company. I want this for client X. Client X say they choose the 525 top of the line one. The escrow company will automatically, you don't have to do this, get an invoice from the home warranty company. At the close of escrow, you pay us this much out of the proceeds for the 525, out of the money in the pot. And you need to verify that escrow, not only did they get that invoice, but they're charging the appropriate party. Now, this will be on your term sheet. I always double check it. So on the term sheet, it said, say the seller's going to pay, right? So when you call escrow, did you get the invoice? Yes, we got the invoice. Seller's paying. Thank you for the reminder. That's it. Okay. You could do all that via email too. Escrow companies notoriously don't do texting. So that kind of sucks. But they do have email or phone with the escrow officer. Okay. Yes.
Is there a general consensus around considered an appliance?
Yes. Anything that is like, okay, general consensus, fridge, stove, range, if it's separated from the stovetop, dishwasher, washer, dryer, and water heater, and furnace. Yeah, any HVAC stuff. Air conditioner is an option. Air conditioners are usually an option. So is the dishwasher and the washer dryer. But anyway, you got to look at the detailed plans from the home warranty company. But there is an exception situation here you need to be aware of. Let's suppose in the contract, when we tell them that when we ask the seller to pay the home warranty, in our test case, we're saying the seller is paying the home warranty. We may specify an amount in the contract. In fact, we always do. What is the amount that the seller will pay? Because the seller needs to know their exposure. You can't leave it blank, right? And then buy all these add-ons and it's costing $1,500, right? So you say $500 on there. But our top of the line plan is $525. What happens to the $25? So your last thing you need to do about the home warranty is if there is any excess amount owed on the warranty, who is paying for it? So your buyer's in contract. The seller's agreed to pay up to $500 for the home warranty. The invoice is $525. Escrow is going to say who's going to pay the overage. What are the options? There are 3.
Seller split.
4 options. Buyer, seller, or buyer's agent. Yes. Now, my advice to you guys is never go to the seller or agent and say, we want you to cover $25. That is a complete waste of your goodwill and your leverage in the transaction. You might have to fight with them over tens of thousands of dollars if you find something big wrong with the house, or some other issue comes out with the buyer's loan and you need an extra week and a half. So keep your guns in and don't fight over pennies. So I don't recommend going to the seller's agent or even doing a 50-50 split. In some scenarios, your buyer will eat it. You call your buyer and say, look, the warranty is an extra $25 for the version you chose. Are you prepared to have that come out of your closing costs? And they wanted the bigger package, so it's no big deal. Sometimes you will pay it as a buyer's agent, as a matter of goodwill with your buyer, depending on the circumstances. You may say, don't worry about it, Mr. Buyer, I'm covering the $25 overage. I really want you to have this bigger plan. Your buyer might say, I only want plan X, but you know plan Y is going to be better for them. Yes.
Is there, does the brokerage require us to encourage home warranty?
No. No.
If they don't want it, they don't want it.
Yeah, exactly. However, I encourage it for first-time home buyers. I want them to have one less thing to worry about because buying a home is so intimidating. In the first year, if something breaks down, you call the warranty company, you pay your $100 deduct, and you're done. At least it's supposed to work that way. And that reminds me, I have to follow up on something. Okay, all right. Yes.
The other way around, seller says, oh, we're gonna pay 500 and it comes up out to 450. They just pay the 450.
They just pay the 450. All right, the next thing you need to do is confirm and complete the appraisal. So we have a loan here, so that means there's going to be an appraisal. You do not order the appraisal. The lender orders the appraisal for the buyer, but you have to coordinate with them. Did you order the appraisal? Believe it or not, sometimes they're a little slow off the mark, shocking as that might be. So you want to make sure that appraisal gets ordered ASAP. At least within 2 days of opening escrow, you want to have a communication with the buyer's lender. Did you order the appraisal? Because there's a timeline on our appraisal. We need to get it done. And sometimes these appraisers get super busy. And we don't want to be running out of time. There you go. Yes. In our case study, we have all contingencies. Okay. But even if there is no appraisal contingency, you should still make work the buyer's lender and get the appraisal ordered fast. You don't want any problems. Yes.
All cash deal?
No appraisal. It doesn't matter in most cases. I had a scenario once where the cash buyer was represented by a third party, and the third party wanted me to order an appraisal for them because they were fiduciaries for the buyer in a legal sense. There was no way they weren't going to do an appraisal. So that was the rare exception.
But they were looking for the appraisal to be
At or equal to, yeah, to protect the investment of the buyer. Yes. All right. So with the appraisal, you're going to coordinate with the lender to verify expedient ordering. That is to say, it's not going to come in late. We're going to get that appraisal on time. You're also going to coordinate with the listing agent for the appraiser to go on site if that's required. The appraiser is going to go on site. You need to make an appointment with the listing agent. And I don't care if the property is vacant or not. You make the appointment with the listing agent. Don't just assume you can go there anytime. I'd say it's a courtesy. You can text them. Mr. Listing Agent, hey, just want to let you know I've scheduled the appointment for 10 a.m. Thursday morning. Is that okay? That's it. They may want to go too to support the appraised value, right?
So would you go and them?
Yes. Attend appraisal if possible. It's the 4th of the 5 bullet points. You should go. And before you go, you should prepare your own comps of recent closings and pendings. You maybe want to do some research on pendings to find out what they're going to close for, so that you are armed and ready to substantiate the value of the price with the appraisal.
And you also go as a seller's agent.
Yes. There's nothing wrong with that. As a seller's agent, you certainly wanted to appraise, especially if you've given the buyer a contingency. You don't want the price getting a negotiation happening later. Yes.
I had a situation where it was really worth it to go out there and meet the appraiser. It was my listing, we were in contract, and there was some doubt around whether it was a 3-1 or a 2-1, and the appraiser came in talking about it as a 2-1, and I pointed out a few features, namely the floor, which was the original floor, that showed that the layout hadn't changed in the house and that it was improperly recorded. She changed it to a 3-1.
Wow, that's huge. That's the value. This is the value we provide as buyer's agents. Someone says you're not worth your fee. That's a very good example of a way you're worth a fee. You represented the seller, right? Yeah. But anyway, yeah. Whether you represent the seller or the buyer, you should run comps. You should be prepared to meet the appraiser and make your argument. You know, there are certain comps they can't look at, but you still do your best. Okay. And then before you get the report back, review potential outcomes and strategies with your client. Now, I have a class recording on my coaching page where we talk about contingencies, and we have a discussion about appraisal contingencies and what to do with various results. So that is where you can get more information on how to have that conversation with a buyer on that class, which is on the coaching page and soon to be on the portal too. All right, and okay. The next thing you need to do, or one of the next things you need to do, I mean, it's a loose order. I mean, the first few you need to do right away, but then the rest of these you can do over the course of the next few days. Before you close, at least a week, file your commission demand with the office. You do that through KW Command, whether you use it or not. And what will happen is that will trigger our commission desk to put together a document of who's getting paid what. Your mentor, the productivity coaching program, that's me, and your any third-party outbound referral fees, all that stuff. And then we review it and make sure it's right. Now, I have an agent in this program who shall remain nameless, who closed a deal a week ago, and the checks haven't come out yet. And that's because the commission was not filed in a timely manner. The commission demand was filed a day before closing on Thursday of last week, and it was wrong. So the money is still sitting in escrow a week later, right? Now, in this case, nobody's upset about it for a variety of weird reasons. Nobody's freaking out. But you wouldn't want to wait a week for your pay in most circumstances. So get your commission demands in. Okay. Shandar learned this, right? You went through this, and it was a bit of an education process.
On my check.
All right. Your job in escrow is to verify the status of your buyer's loan at least twice. But ideally, you should have a good communication channel with the buyer's lender and be talking to them regularly, almost buddy, how things going. But there are two times for sure. At least 3 days before your loan contingency is due for your buyer, you should be calling your buyer's lender and saying, how are things going? What's going on with the loan? And at least 24 hours before the loan actually funds and the money gets transferred to escrow for the loan, right at the end, call them again. Are we good for funding tomorrow? Even if they've sent an email saying it's going to fund tomorrow, right? Now, if you are a listing agent, which is a little outside of the scope of this, but if you're a listing agent, you should be phoning the buyer's agent when any contingency is coming up. You do never phone the buyer's lender, right? You phone the buyer's agent and saying, what's going on with the buyer's loan? Are we all on track? That's good due diligence for a seller's agent. So coordinate with the lender regarding key loan activity timelines. Here are 6 key loan activity timelines. Loan doc delivery. Has the buyer given the lender all the documents they want? Pay stubs, W-2s, tax returns, letters from about child support, whatever it is. Government benefit letters, whatever. Do they have everything they need? Has the loan processing been done? Now, what is loan processing? That's where the lender goes through and makes sure they have all the paperwork they need from the buyer. Is it the appropriate paperwork? And is it dated right? Blah, blah, blah. That's called loan processing. After loan processing complete, they get a package of docs, usually in digital form, and they send that to somebody called the underwriter. The underwriter's job is to assess risk. They're the ones who are actually analyzing these documents. Is the money that they say they're making true? They call the employer to verify wages and current employment. Is the bank statement showing any weird deposits or withdrawals that we don't know what they are? Is the support letter legitimate? Is this legitimate? Is that right? Is the tax return add up for what they reported in their loan application? I mean, there's lots and lots and lots of questions that I don't even know a fraction of them. The job of the underwriter is to determine if the bank should take the risk. The underlying investor may not be your loan officer. The investor that is going to be financing, putting the money in, right? Is the risk okay? Are we still okay? Is this person still fit within the quote unquote guidelines for the loan? Very critical step. I like to say that underwriters crawl underneath rocks to find reasons why not to do the loan. But it's a very important step. So you want to know what's going on with that. When the underwriter says we're good, it's called clear to close. So when your lender, loan officer says to you, yeah, we're clear to close, it's out of underwriting, which is great. Okay. There are near the end, sometime within 2 or 3 days of you removing that contingency, or even afterwards, depending on circumstances. It's very hazy when it actually happens, but you want it to happen as soon as possible. Prior to doc conditions, when they give clear to close, they will say, yes, we're going to fund this loan. We're going to do this loan so long as the buyer gets us this documents. Once the buyer gets us this documents, we'll send the paperwork to escrow for them to sign. That's called prior to doc condition. Prior to funding conditions are the buyer is signed, but we're not going to put the money in escrow until the buyer does this, this, and this, and this. Usually small things. A good lender partner will tell you exactly what the conditions are and whether they're concerned about them or not. Over and over again, I have these conversations with my loan officers for my buyers in escrow as I'm figuring out how this is going to all close up. Your job is to know what's going on with this. You don't do it, but you need to know what's going on. All right, let's keep going because I got to go through a whole bunch more. And we only got 10 minutes left. Complete the AVID. If your buyer agent AVID, all agents have to do an agent visual inspection disclosure. You should do it as soon as possible after you get into contract. Certainly before you remove any investigation contingency, so your buyer can review the report. So you need to coordinate your site visit, okay, with the listing agent. You need to send the report to the buyer after you've completed it for their review and discussion with them and signatures by them, which you will do. And then you forward that to the listing agent. You don't need, pro tip, go do your AVID when you're out on site for the home inspection or the pest inspection. You're going on site anyway. Yeah, this person's going to do their inspection. You're not crawling underneath the house in most cases with the inspectors. So you can go off and do your AVID while they're doing that. You don't need a separate site visit for this.
You can do it on Glide too.
Yes. Yes. Glide makes it simpler. I actually I use Glide, and Glide is a tool for doing AVIDs automatically, where you can use your phone and just talk verbally put in, but you still need to edit it, whether you do it verbally or not. I find I still need to edit it later because it doesn't do punctuation very well. All right. Where can you find tips on how to do an AVID? Oh my goodness. Ring, ring, ring. 5 stars for Dustin. Yes, it is on the agent portal. About 2 years ago, I wrote a tip sheet on how to do an AVID. And I believe it is a really helpful tool if you've never done one before. So that's where it is. Okay, you're going to come to a point in the transaction where you have to remove contingencies. The deadline as per whatever the situation is. In ours, we had a case study, 10, 14, and 17 days. You want to discuss with your clients their options for each contingency. Absolutely no later than the deadline, but or when they're due. You're going to complete a contingency release form for each contingency as needed, either to waive it or to partially waive it, right? And then you're going to send the form to the listing agent to say, hey, here's my contingency release. And then you're going to call the listing agent, hey, I sent it, or text them, I sent it. But if there's something to discuss. So I'm sending you this contingency release, but as you know, I also sent you an extension of time addendum for that other contingency. So we need an extra week, blah, 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 as per our conversation, whatever it is. You're going to be trying to communicate with the listing agent so there's no, you don't have to surprise them. You're trying to keep something smooth. The more you can set expectations, the better. So 3 or 4 days before your contingency is due, and you know you already know your buyer's going to need more time, you get on the phone with the listing agent and say, hey, listen, things are looking good, and we're going to need an extra 3 days on this contingency. I'm giving you a heads up now, 3 days before the due date, so you know. Now, there may be strategic reasons for waiting right till the deadline before you tell them, but you should try to keep an open line, set expectations, manage it so nobody is shocked and surprised as much as possible.
What happens if the law turns out like contingency and you don't do a contingency release formal?
Nothing. The seller has to force your hand. Yeah. But don't go that way. Do something. And I have a whole contingency, the same class I've been talking about on the coaching page about working with buyer contingencies discusses that issue. All right. Final walkthrough. Typically within 3 to 5 days of closing, it's in the contract. How many days? It has to be within, not on day 3 before and not on day 5 before, but whatever within that range. Schedule a date for your site visit with the listing agent. Discuss the purpose of this inspection and its limitations with your buyer before you go on site, or at least at the door as you're going in. You complete the VP form, verification of property condition form, as necessary. And then you send that to the listing agent. You do, not your TC. And then you call the listing agent to discuss it. Now, question, what are the limitations of the final walkthrough? Dustin.
You can't say, things that are, it's not a contingency.
There you go. Ding, ding, ding. The final walkthrough, no matter what your buyer observes or you observe, does not create a cancellation right. The seller has to make it good if it's a legitimate thing. So let's suppose you go to the property 3 days before close and there's water puddling. I've had this happen. Water puddling on the floor in the kitchen and a drip, drip, drip from underneath the sink. Okay. You document it, you note it, you tell the seller's agent, and a professional seller's agent will say, oh my goodness, we will take care of that right away. That's what happens. The seller has a legal obligation to deliver the property in substantially the same condition as it was at the date of acceptance. Okay. They also have an obligation to remove all their personal property from everywhere, not just inside the house, but also behind the shed. I had that happen too. Behind the shed at the back of the yard. And also, if the seller did repairs during escrow, fix something, then you have to make sure that it was fixed right. That's all a final walkthrough is for. Yes. No. It's based on the condition of the property at time of sale, at time of ratification.
So if you remove contingencies and major earthquake, you do a walkthrough the houses.
So a major earthquake would be a substantial change in the condition of the home, and that is not covered for in the contract. Technically, the seller is not delivering the home in substantially the same condition at the time of acceptance, even though it was no fault of theirs. It doesn't matter. It doesn't technically create cancellation right. The seller would have an obligation to remediate the home, but both parties may choose that instead of having the seller remediate the home, that we're just going to cancel and return the deposit even. So in an extraordinary situation of an earthquake, after contingencies are removed, most people of good faith work it out. It doesn't end up being a big dispute in most cases because people tend to be reasonable. And also, we're all very preoccupied with health and safety issues after an earthquake, and maybe we want to make the problem go away, so we settle it, right? But it isn't normally, I mean, that's a pretty weird situation. But occasionally you'll get a seller who isn't cooperative, a seller who doesn't want to come remove all their personal property, or a seller who doesn't want to fix that broken window that you say was broken. They say, well, it wasn't broke, but they have no proof that it wasn't. I mean, that it was broke at the beginning. It's based on time of acceptance. All right, let's keep going. We have a few more things to do. Buyer signing. Before your buyer gets the keys, they have to go sign documents with the escrow company to confirm the loan, sign off on the loan, sign certain tax paperwork for property taxes. Tell your buyer they're going to be signed. Make sure they know you're going to get final terms. So what happens, remember those terms we set up at the beginning? You're going to get final verification of terms with escrow within a day or two of closing. You want to make sure that everything is matching and is correct. Terms may have changed in the course of the deal. You may have had a price negotiation in the middle of the deal. The amount of the home warranty might have changed. All kinds of stuff might have changed. So you want to make sure it matches the current circumstances of your deal. If there's any problems on the final terms worksheet, you resolve them with the buyer's lender or with the buyer or with escrow, right? With the seller. And then you want to know that the escrow officer has arranged your buyer signing. You do not arrange the buyer signing, escrow does. They will often have the buyer have a mobile notary come to their work or their home, or they will have the buyer come to their office. Those are the typical ways. Attend in person if you can. If you can go in person, it's so much better, especially with first-time buyers. They feel so much happier if you're there, even though you're just basically watching, but you can explain stuff and give them a sense of confidence about it. If you can arrange it, you should go. Yes. I don't know. Probably not. Yeah, probably not. If escrow doesn't close, if the deal gets canceled, the only people who got their money are the appraiser and the inspectors. The home warranty people also don't get paid. Recording, yay! Recording. That is when the county officially says, yes, this deal is done, ownership is transferred, right? Tell your client it's going to happen. It is always the day of close by definition. You close when it records, and it records when it closes. So that's, advise the buyer that they can't move in or out personal property to the site before recording. No dropping off stuff in the front yard or the backyard. No going and living there the night before. Absolutely none of that. And so they can't. As soon as it records, you are then it's their property, then they can do stuff. Until it records, it's still not their property, even though it's 99.99% going to close. It's still not their property till the county says so. And then you call them. You hear word from escrow, usually by email, or they call you. And we've recorded, we're on title, or we've recorded, the deal is transaction is done. You want to tell your buyers right away. This is a happy news call. I'm so excited. The place is yours. Yeah, it's great. Tell them the news right away, even if it's first thing in the morning. The next thing you're going to do is get the keys to the buyer. You want to do this the same day. Even if you close at 4 o'clock in the afternoon or 5 o'clock, you do not want you hold on the keys for 24 hours. You do not want your buyers not having their keys. Okay. It would have to be very extraordinary circumstances. Okay. You maybe arrange for a friend of theirs to pick up the keys, but do not hold on to the buyer's keys. So what I like to do is meet the client at the property and I hand them their keys on a nice keychain that's branded to me. Right. And I usually give them a thank you gift at that point. Right. Arrive a few minutes early before them. Take the keys out of the lockbox if you did not obtain them from the seller's agent in a different manner beforehand. So you have them to present. And that's a Instagram moment, right? Present the keys in a formal and fun way. Make a big deal about this. You are trying to create a memory here. This is a big deal. They're buying a home, sometimes their first home. You want them to celebrate. You want it to be a big deal. It is a big deal. Let's make it the big deal it is. And have fun with it. And try to relax too, because this is the fun part, right? Advise the listing agent that the lockbox is empty and that they can remove the lockbox and they can remove their sign. And advise your buyer too. Hey, the agent's going to come by. They're not going to bother you. They're going to remove the lockbox from the water pipe. They're also going to, the sign, some people are going to come tomorrow afternoon and take the sign away. No one's going to bother you, but it's going to happen. Celebrations. So what happens now? So you're going to send or deliver the closing gift to the buyer. You may want to send closing gifts to other people in the transaction that helped. You may want to leave the gift for the buyers to discover when they go onto the property after they get the keys. You may want to send thank you notes to all the key players in the transaction who helped it to succeed. Why not? Thank you notes are very powerful, especially handwritten ones. And arrange for follow-up check-ins. Put it on your calendar when you're going to follow up with the buyer, your client, to see how things are going. When is their move-in date? Stuff like that. All right, final thoughts. Breathe. People have done these transactions many, 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 many times before you, and people will do them many, many, many times after you. This is your first transaction or second transaction, but it is still just a transaction, and it requires professional management. The other thing I want to say is that transactions can get way more complicated than what I just told you. This is a very simple standard situation, but as Shandor knows, stuff happens in escrow. These are complicated things, transferring items of such great value and such great importance in people's lives. Despite the best laid plans, stuff's going to happen. Your job, be cool. Be cool. Not to make light of it, but you're the professional. You're not the one freaking out, at least not on the outside. Okay. You're going to be the problem solver. Right? And remember, always, always, always keep your client's best interests at the top of mind, even if it means you're going to recommend they cancel the contract. Because at the end of the day, you want to serve them, even if it means this deal isn't going to work. And it happens to all of us. It's very upsetting because we were kind of already counting that paycheck, right? But it happens. All right. If you want a copy of this presentation, you can click on this QR code and I'll send you a copy of this presentation. And it will be available on my YouTube channel if you want to, if you wish to watch it again. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
Everyone get this? Can I turn it off? Yeah. All righty. And thank you, all of you.